Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The husband has installed a video surveillance system, but then he receives a series of letters addressed to his wife. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. I'm waiting. I'm sitting here with a Colt M1911 pistol in one hand and a glass of very expensive whiskey in the other. I'm waiting to be arrested. I put down the empty glass, take one of the general's cigars, and light it. I smoke a little, and the taste of nicotine calms my nerves. Yes, I'm waiting for the police to arrive with flashing lights and sirens. Why? This story begins many years ago when I met Paula Hansen and fell in love with her. We both served in the Army at the time. I was in the second year of my second 4-year contract and had reached the rank of Staff Sergeant. I served full-time and had airborne and Ranger sleeve insignia. Paula was a captain in the California National Guard and had a degree in journalism. We met at a club on Fort Irwin one evening and hit it off immediately, even though she was a part-time officer and I was a full-time officer. All I knew was that with her beautiful blue eyes and dark wavy hair, I was captivated. My name is John Blakely. During my service, I was able to save enough money to attend UCLA through the GI Bill. As it turned out, Paula also attended UCLA and still had a house nearby. She gave me her address and phone number and said that when I retired, I could stay with her while I studied. God, she was like a tornado in bed. During our 4 years at UCLA, while earning our computer science degrees, we were inseparable. For some strange reason, she loved me, and for more obvious reasons, I loved her with all my heart, soul, and being. I won't lie and say I wasn't tempted by others. Damn, I was no angel, but with Paula, I knew she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Fast forward, and we still didn't have children. It wasn't that I didn't want them, but she was still at the peak of her career, and I wasn't about to get in her way. Hell, she made the same amount as me. I finished my degree and landed a great job at a global technology company. When Paula received the enviable assignment of writing a biography of a famous general, she had just been promoted to lieutenant colonel in the California National Guard. Well, let's say that Jack Nicholson was right in A Few Good Men. I didn't know what real life was until I had the pleasure of a senior officer. Oh, and before you start screaming fraternization at me, we were not directly subject to it. When we started dating, problems began. Paula had to travel to Afghanistan to obtain General Peterson's memoirs for the book. She was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks, but ended up being gone for a month. When she returned, she became more withdrawn and distant. I asked her what happened, and she said that she saw things there that really shocked her. Since I also saw the fighting, I could understand her and hugged her tightly. That night, we made love, and after that, she seemed to come back to me. She became the woman I fell in love with again. A couple of years later, we moved to Washington, D.C., and that's where our lives really turned upside down. First, I was recruited to join the CIA and head up the YET department at the headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Now I was earning more than in the private sector. Paula was thrilled that I got the job, and she was also thrilled to be working alongside General David Peterson again, getting more material for his biography. The general was appointed director of the CIA, so we worked almost side by side. I met him at a social event I went to with Paula, and he seemed like a nice person, but some things should not be taken for granted. That night, my suspicions began. I also met the general's wife, who was a very nice woman, if not a bit chubby. At least she loved her husband just as I loved my wife. No, the suspicions began when they danced 4 dances in a row, and his hand went down to Paula's 5th place during a slow dance. That was it. I didn't care that he was the head of the CIA. I was fed up. I walked onto the dance floor and politely intervened. In other words, I clenched my fist and was ready to kill the scoundrel if he didn't let me dance with my wife. Luckily for both of us, he handed her to me, and I let her know in low tones that the way he was groping her 5th place was not cool at all. Paula just laughed and said he was just an old lecher. I tried to laugh too, but the seeds of doubt about her loyalty and his honor had already been sown. Paula and I had a big fight that night when we got home. Honey, I'm tired of this guy getting too familiar with you on the dance floor. I don't care that he's the head of the CIA. That does not give him the right to hug another man's wife, especially my wife. I said through clenched teeth. Stop being jealous, baby. He was just flirting, Paula chuckled. She may not have taken it seriously, but I did. No, Paula, I'm not just jealous. You didn't do anything to stop him or talk him out of it. What does that tell me? I said with obvious anger in my voice. Yes, I was jealous, but I also saw things that I really didn't like, and it felt like they were rubbing it in my face. That should tell you that you have to trust your wife, John. Paula played the trust card. Okay, no problem. I trust you, honey. I just don't trust him. He slowly shook his head. Well, he's your boss, so you'd better trust him. Paula stuck out her tongue and crossed her eyes, which reminded me of one of the reasons I fell in love with her in the first place. I laughed in spite of myself, and she threw herself into my arms, kissing me passionately. I think it's cute that you were willing to take down your big boss to protect my honor, she said. That's what I do, darling, I smiled, then kissed her as passionately as she kissed me. I knew she caught my vibe when I broke into the dance, and I think she liked it. I knew I could handle the old man in a fair fight if it came down to it. I still did morning physical training every day before work and went to the gym 3 to 4 times a week to stay in shape. What was great was that Paula ran with me in the morning, and she looked amazing. She kept herself in shape too, and I really enjoyed seeing my wife's 5th place in those shorts when I was behind her on our runs. Her 5th place was absolutely gorgeous in those shorts, to say the least. The only woman who had a better 5th place than her was Talisa Martin, a member of my cyber warfare team at the CIA. As an IT director, I wasn't just a tech guy, I also became a fully trained operative within a year. My Ranger experience helped with this. The cyber warfare department was engaged not only in hacking computers but also in other activities, so to speak, activities that often required a competent secret agent in the field. Talisa was black and reminded me a little of Bayon, but without the long blonde hair. Talisa, as she liked to be called, wore a short pixie cut, keeping her hair its natural black color. Her skin was the same caramel color as Bayon's, and her lips, oh God, those lips. Before you say I'm some kind of scoundrel, let me say that I was happily married and had no intention of cheating on my beautiful wife. I was married, but not dead, so I could at least do some window shopping. Everything returned to normal for a few more months. With Paula's transfer to the Virginia National Guard, she moved forward quickly and nearly finished her book on General David Peterson. I read some of her drafts and praised her for her excellent work. She said I was only saying this because I loved her, but I assured her that if she had messed up, I would definitely have pointed it out. She laughed, and I pulled her away from Microsoft Word long enough to get her into bed. The only thing that bothered me a little was that she had a folder on her desk marked Top Secret. Okay, I knew she had security clearance just like I did, but storing a folder marked Top Secret in an unsecured place was a serious violation of protocol. But that night, I pushed it to the back of my mind and focused on pleasing her. She more than reciprocated. God, how I loved having a night with her. The next morning, I asked her about the top secret file. Oh, it's already been declassified, she replied casually. Oh yeah? What kind of operation was that? I asked. This is the funniest thing, she laughed. Some World War II operation called Wolf Spain, where the Army Ranger attached to the O and a British SIS agent allegedly broke into Hitler's bunker and killed him along with a bunch of werewolves. I think it was written as a joke, she said, giggling. I laughed too because this would be a great April Fool's Day joke. What was the Ranger's name? I asked, grinning. First Lieutenant Colton Drake, she said. She grinned as if anyone would believe that the SIS agent's name was Miriam Brindle. We laughed and joked about a fictitious operation that included a report from General Patton, who must have been in on the joke. We looked at the file together and laughed at how thorough it was. At that moment, my suspicions were dispelled, but something in the back of my mind felt like something was wrong. I just couldn't figure out what it was yet. The following Monday at work, Talisa approached me when she found me laughing to myself. Okay, boss, what's the joke? She raised an eyebrow, standing with her arms thrown over her chest and her side stuck out. Just an old declassified file that Paula brought home, I smiled, telling her about a proposed operation in the last days of World War II in Europe. She burst out laughing when I told her about General George S. Patton's fake report. We spent most of the morning joking about it and troubleshooting the systems when they needed attention. My team did the rest of the work, and my feeling that something was wrong returned within a few hours. Talisa noticed that something was wrong. I'm usually good at hiding my emotions, but this kept bothering me. Talisa could recognize this since she was the best at reading people. She walked into my office and closed the door behind her. "Okay, boss, spit it out. What the hell is going on?" I sighed. What I'm about to say should not go beyond the boundaries of this room. Do you understand? I looked at her. Got it, John, she nodded. Everyone called me John or boss. It was okay for me. Talisa called me boss more often than anyone else in our little corner of Langley. She only called me John when she knew it was serious. Okay, I think Paula might be thinking about cheating, if she hasn't already, I said bluntly. Her eyes widened. She better not dare. Damn, if she cheats on a nice guy like you, I'll pick you up and show you what true love is, she smiled at me. But seriously, boss, do you really think she could do that? My facial expression conveyed everything about my feelings. From what I saw at the general's dinner the other day, yes, I really think she could. I described in detail how she danced with General Peterson, our big boss, and her attempts to convince me that it was just as flirting. Maybe he was just drunk, Talisa shrugged, although she immediately realized the absurdity of her words. She grimaced when she realized that the general did not drink. You know he did it on purpose, I said firmly. She nodded. Yes, he had to, she said. Damn, John, they both basically insulted you in front of all these people. It was something I really didn't want to think about. Yes, they both insulted me in front of many of our friends and colleagues. Talisa wasn't there that night. What I'm about to do is outside the rules and legally questionable. If you don't want to get caught in the crossfire, leave my office now. I looked her straight into her dark brown eyes. Her full lips were pressed into a determined line as she met my gaze with confidence. I'm with you, John. Whatever you're up to, I'm with you, she nodded. You might change your mind when you find out what I'm going to do, I warned her. Just say it, and whatever you say will stay here. She sat down opposite me at my desk. Thank you, I smiled. I then outlined my plan to her, and she nodded in support of each point. After 15 minutes of discussing the details of our plan, she added a few more things we could do. I realized again how good a friend she is to me and how seriously she takes her job. What it all boiled down to is that if Paula and General Peterson were indeed having an affair, it could put national security at risk. For those who say that personal life does not affect professional life, I will say this, in the world of international espionage and national security, this is not true. If a hostile foreign power finds out that a CIA director is having an affair with the wife of one of his subordinates, you can bet that hostile foreign power will do everything in its power to discredit the CIA director or subordinate and his wife. Blackmail is a powerful and accepted tool in the spy game. Now, my job is not just to get a divorce if the alleged affair actually took place. My job now includes keeping my country safe. If that meant exposing the director and my wife, so be it. If nothing happened, so much the better. But I couldn't risk assuming that nothing was happening. Too many things have been bothering me since that night. Talisa and I decided that this operation should be kept secret from everyone except us. I created a dummy email and used the systems here to tap into the general's and my wife's phone lines. Normally, communication surveillance is the domain of the NSA, but here at the CIA, we have the same equipment for the same purposes. I love redundancy in national security systems. We set up monitoring and proxy servers for our operation. I was able to connect to the director's computer and Paula's home computer. Now, I could look over their shoulders and see everything they were doing on their computers. I also set my laptop to record everything they did. As head of IT, I could do this without arousing suspicion. This is quite easy to explain by saying that I was simply monitoring the systems for suspicious activity. Plus, I had software that would allow me to instantly wipe my hard drive if needed. Part of me felt like I was betraying them, but not a very big part. I knew that if something happened, I was doing my duty to protect my country. I also collected evidence in case the general's wife and I needed it for a divorce. Talisa also went ahead with the plans by cloning the general's cell phone while I cloned Paula's cell phone. That night at home, she also gave me the necessary surveillance equipment for my home, where I listened to our home phones. Talisa went undercover at the general's house for the same purpose and installed listening devices on their home phones. She also configured the monitoring software to respond to keywords that could indicate something other than professional behavior. These files were then sent to a dummy email address that I created just in case. I also set it up so that this account could be accessed from anywhere with wireless internet access. Setting it all up took 2 days, and work continued as usual. I set up my cell phone to receive notifications if any files were sent to my new email address. Paula's and the general's cell phones were never used for anything remotely resembling intimate activity. Everything remained at a professional level. The following week, there was an event in Botsy that was a complete failure from the very beginning. 2 private contractors and our ambassador to Libya were killed that night. It's not for me to judge whether everything possible was done, but at that moment, everything went wrong. That night, Paula was out with the girls from her Virginia National Guard unit, or so she said. Also, when everything started to fall apart, General David Peterson was also unavailable. His cell phone was turned off. At this time, I received a series of alerts on my phone from email about incoming messages. Talisa had set it to 24-hour updates, which I agreed with since more often than not, it could be difficult to explain during dinner or something like that. So it was set to midnight when my phone would normally be turned off, allowing me to check it in the morning from the safety of my office. However, that night I did not sleep and waited for Paula to return home. When I checked my emails, I almost threw my iPhone across the room. I calmed down and called Talisa. "Hey John, what's going on?" she asked sleepily. "I'm forwarding these emails to you." "Tell me what you think," I said, then sent them to her from my laptop through the proxy servers. She read them and was silent for a few moments before blurting out, "Oh my God," when she saw into messages between Paula Blakely and David Peterson. "That's it, honey," I said, seething with rage. I was already planning to blame this brat in the divorce papers and share all this evidence with Diane Peterson as soon as possible. But first, as they say, it's a small matter. After we solidified the next phase of our plan, I told Talisa to stay out of trouble and that I would take the fall if anything went wrong. It was already after 2 a.m. when Paula finally returned home. I sat with a beer in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. I printed out all of her emails with the general from the previous day. "Oh dear, are you still awake?" she asked with a surprised and somewhat guilty look. "Yes, I've been waiting for you, honey," I said with a hint of sarcasm in my voice. "Had fun with the general?" I asked, not hiding my displeasure. "Oh, I mean with the girls," I added. "What are you talking about, John?" "You've been drinking," she tried to laugh it off. "This is what I'm talking about, my dear faithful wife," I said, standing up and handing her the printed emails. Each contained complete responses from General David Peterson, the director of the CIA, detailing what they planned to do that night in erotic letters that, if they had been text messages, would have been considered intimating. She gasped as she read each one, but her reaction was not what I expected. "Are you spying on me?" she screamed. "No, I'm not." "I'm so sorry," she said. "Honey, let me explain." She immediately went on the offensive. "Wow, I caught you cheating. I've already sent these letters to the lawyer in preparation for the divorce, and you accuse me of being a spy. Go to hell," I shouted at her. "And don't worry about your boyfriend, he'll be tried for breaking family ties, and I'll list him in our divorce papers," I added in a more conversational tone, giving her a sinister smile. "What have you done?" she said. "I've already sent your letters to Peterson's wife too. She'll probably file for divorce on Monday if she agrees that he cheated on her," I said with a softer smile this time. "Tell me, Paula, did you or I deserve what you and your scumbag boyfriend did to us?" But she had already stopped listening and immediately called someone on the phone. "Yes, it's me. John found out everything. He already sent letters to your wife." "I know." "What are you going to do?" she asked. Okay, she smiled at me as she hung up. "Let me guess, am I fired?" "I wouldn't be surprised," I grinned in response. Worse than that, a traitor, she replied with a triumphant smile. She still didn't know that her phone conversations were still being recorded. No problem. I'll have them by tomorrow night at midnight, but she still didn't know this traitor, me. You two are putting national security at risk, I retorted. A CIA director having an affair with the wife of one of his subordinates? Do you even understand what would happen if a hostile foreign power found out about this? Do you understand that you, me, or even General David, that idiot, could be compromised with that? Everything is now in plain sight. At least there won't be any blackmail forcing you to do what they want. Paula's face turned pale at these words. Yes, cheaters never plan for the worst-case scenario, I said. I walked over to where my gym bag was and took it. While you're thinking about how you ruined our marriage, your career, your lover's career, and nearly caused a leak in the security of our country, Paula, also think about the pain you caused me, Mrs. Peterson, and their children. Well, at least we have no children. With that, I walked away, leaving her to sob. As I left the house and headed to my '79 Camaro Z28, the red paint with the double racing stripes along the body was still my pride. My dad helped me restore this classic sports car when I was in high school. He bought me the body for my 14th birthday, and by the time I was 16, we had it completely restored. The first time I drove it after getting my driver's license, I got pulled over for speeding. The policeman let me off with a warning, and I took that warning to heart. I slowed down until I was sure there were no police or security cameras nearby. I tossed my duffel bag into the back seat, fired up the powerful 327 cubic inch V8 engine, and jumped out of the driveway. I parked in reverse for a quick getaway and enjoyed the squeal of the tires as I stepped on the gas. After driving 15 miles towards their secret hideout, they found me. I saw black SUVs in the rearview mirror as they quickly approached. I stepped on the gas, watching the speedometer rise above 120 miles per hour. I couldn't help but smile as I ran away from those SUVs like a bat out of hell. The main problem was not the FBI agents behind me, it was the FBI helicopter that accompanied me and illuminated my path with its searchlight. When I pulled over to the side of the road, got out, took my gun, and started shooting at the helicopter, it turned away. To my surprise, the searchlight shattered, perhaps from the most successful shot in history. I couldn't help but laugh at this and got back into the car. Hearing the SUVs trying to catch up with me, I revved up the gas, put on my night vision goggles, and turned off the headlights on my Camaro. 75 miles later, I turned onto the dirt road leading to my secret hideout. To make a few things clear, the CIA does not have jurisdiction over operations within the United States of America. In fact, it is illegal for the CIA to operate inside the United States. But if you truly believe that the CIA doesn't operate inside the United States just because it's illegal, you really need to get your head out of the sand. This is how the lesson ends. With that in mind, I appropriated an old CIA black site in rural Virginia to use as my secret hideout. It looked like an old, broken-down farm. The farm is rumored to have once been a stop on the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. As soon as I had the codes for the site, I removed it from the CIA registry. This was one of the actions I took in planning this contingency. As director of the CIA, General David Peterson had vast resources at his disposal. Essentially, he could call all Homeland Security agencies into action if he needed to. Well, with me on the loose and with a lot of evidence that could have ended his career, he decided he needed it. When I sent emails to Diane Peterson, I did so from my primary email address. My fictitious account remained clean. I sent Talisa an email to her new fake account telling her where I was. I know the old saying, don't trust anyone, but this doesn't really help. I needed to trust someone, and the only person I could trust was Talisa Martin. I then sent from a cafe in a nearby town and from a second fictitious account emails between General Peterson and Paula Blakely. I let my beard grow and put on a hat and dark sunglasses, Spy Disguise 101. Where did I send them? All the major news networks, even Fox News. I also sent recordings of Paula's conversation with the idiot from the night I found out what they were doing. Now, I was the subject of a worldwide manhunt led by the CIA, FBI, and NSA. My Camaro was safely hidden in an underground garage at a black site. I rode an old Harley Panhead motorcycle that I found in an underground garage. With my new disheveled look, the bike suited me better than before. Talisa kept me informed of what was happening at home. She arrived at the shelter unexpectedly. When she opened the door to the bunker from the underground garage, she saw me pointing a .45 caliber barrel at her. Okay, I get it. You don't like visitors, she exclaimed. I lowered my weapon to the side. Damn, Talisa, I could have warned you in advance, I grumbled, then laughed. She threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly. Sorry, John, I didn't want to risk the NSA tracking my call to you. What about you being followed? You know you could have been followed, right? I said. I untied them, she replied with a smug smile. Then she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. You need to shave. I'll shave when I don't have to live on the run anymore, I grinned in response. What brought you here? I asked finally. I just wanted to see you and make sure you were okay, she said as she released me and followed me into the living room. We sat down on the sofa together, and I looked at her. God, how beautiful she is. That can't be the only reason. What's going on in the camp? I asked, referring to Langley. Crap, and more crap, she shook her head. The major news networks have finally begun to investigate your claims and evidence until your fugitive status was revealed to the press. Which is both good and bad. Good because they are not using the news to spread my photo and find me, and bad because once this gets out, they will have to take my evidence seriously. I nodded, understanding. What are you going to do? She asked. To be honest, I no longer knew what to do. I could wait and see how long it took for the trash to get the local police to look for me, or I could force the issue and head to New York for a surprise appearance on this morning show. No, that would be too risky. The news people had my photo and knew that I was unavailable for comment, but nothing about the hunt that was being waged against me internally by security authorities. I was simply not available for comment. If they pinned me down in some secluded spot on the road, they could make me disappear very quickly. I needed something reliable. I looked at her and smiled. I will cut off the head of the snake. Her mouth dropped open in shock. John, you can't, she screamed. If you kill him, her voice trailed off as she shook her head. Do you trust me? I asked, looking into her eyes. Certainly, she nodded once. Then trust me now, I said and hugged her. She lifted her chin, and our lips met in the most sensual kiss I've ever had with a woman. Our tongues danced together, and her arms wrapped around my neck. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I have to do, you can't be a part of it, I whispered as I picked her up and carried her to the bedroom. I laid her down on the bed and checked her pulse to make sure I hadn't given her too much. She was breathing evenly, and her heartbeat was strong. Fine. I smiled and kissed her softly on the lips, then left. Now, I felt like Rick from Casablanca leaving the woman who actually loved me. I felt bad, but I didn't want her to get caught in the crossfire. I took several weapons and ammunition from the arsenal in the bunker, as well as 2 handcuffs. I could also have taken Talisa's car, but decided not to. I didn't want what I did tonight to affect her in any way. That's why I chose my reliable Camaro. I decided that if I died tonight or got caught, I would at least have one last ride with the breeze. I smiled as I opened the door and tossed the SMG into the passenger seat. I buckled up, started the car, and listened to the engine purr, begging me to let the horses run free. I pressed the garage door opener and drove up the ramp into the Central Virginia sunset. I put on my night vision glasses again and drove without headlights, accelerating at full speed. I made one call from my spare phone before reaching my destination. I introduced myself and said that everything would become clear if they met me at the specified address. I soon found myself in the area where General Peterson lives and stopped in front of his house. I parked across from Paula's car in front of the garage. No one could leave without driving over my car. Paula was here too. This only added spice to my plans. I grabbed the HK and quickly headed to the front door. I rang the bell and waited with my SMG ready. Diana opened the door and screamed in surprise. I put my finger to my lips in the universal gesture of silence, and she nodded, her eyes wide with shock. I walked in, and she took a step back, raising her hands. I leaned forward and whispered to her, "Diana, You don't have to worry. You're the only innocent one here. I nodded and smiled. I'm not going to kill anyone if I can avoid it. Okay, she swallowed and nodded. Maybe, she said. Ma'am, you just need to trust me. I'm not going to kill them, but they've been deceiving us for quite some time, I said in a serious tone. She nodded again and smiled nervously. I put my left hand in my pocket and turned on the recorder. I beckoned Diana to follow me into the living room, where Paula and the general were sitting. He smiled at her as she walked in ahead of me, but the smile froze and disappeared when he saw my gaunt face and the weapon I was holding. The traitor himself, he screamed, but I aimed the weapon at him before he could get up. Is that what you told your loving wife? I growled. That my evidence of your treason was nothing more than an attempt to undermine national security? Paula turned pale when she heard what I said. We can explain, dear, she begged. No, you can't explain, I blurted out. If anyone is a traitor here, it's you too. Now take off your clothes, I shouted in my best command voice. General Peterson looked like he was going to disobey, so I shot the phone between them before he could react. The suppressed MP5 made a poof sound as the bullet destroyed the home phone. Paula had already begun to take off her clothes, and the general also complied. Wow, Paula, apparently you didn't cheat on me because of your size, I remarked. Paula blushed and turned away in shame, but even without anything and scared, she was still a beautiful woman. Soon, the whole world would see how beautiful she was without clothes. What are you going to do? Diana asked. Well, I think they need a little humiliation, don't you? I asked with a smile. Actually, I think I agree, she said. I noticed that neither of them tried to deny the betrayal when confronted directly with it. A grin appeared on Diana's face as she looked at her husband. You scum. I hope you get fired for this, she said. I couldn't help but smile back. Knock him down, I said. Well done, Diana. Now, what happens next depends on your honesty. Since we know that cheating did occur, I'm going to ask a series of questions. Your honesty will decide your fate. Just know that in the last few weeks, I have learned a lot more than you can guess. I smiled, letting them call my bluff. They nodded in understanding, and Diana walked over and slapped her husband across the face. He looked at me angrily. Oh no, sir, don't look at me like that. You and my soon-to-be ex-wife are to blame for what happened. You tried to use me as a scapegoat when I exposed your feelings so that you wouldn't seem like a threat to national security, right? I said. It wasn't supposed to be like this, said. How was it supposed to be then? Would you like to enlighten me? You were never supposed to find out, he said in an even tone. Of course. I shouldn't have. Just out of curiosity, how long did you two sleep together? I asked, abandoning all politeness. For years, Paula said, embarrassed. Since your first trip to Afghanistan, I confirmed, and she nodded. Yes, I'm so sorry, John, she said with a pleading look in her eyes. It's a shame we got caught, isn't it? I growled. I know my almost ex-husband is sorry he got caught, Diana exclaimed, then reached down and grabbed him between the legs. She squeezed and squeezed, and his face turned red with pain and humiliation as his wife squeezed him until he fell to his knees. I bet it hurts, I chuckled. No bets, Diana replied, then looked at me as she walked away from General Peterson. John, could you do me a favor and shoot my husband off his dignity? She asked. I don't know if I can hit such a small target, but I can try, I chuckled, and she laughed. Enough! Paula screamed. You have a confession, just let us go. She was now begging. Of course, I shrugged. But you will leave this house without anything, I told her, then walked forward and pulled the first pair of handcuffs out of my pocket, handcuffing her as she stood there in shock. I pushed her towards the front door. When she approached the door, I opened it and pushed her out straight into the light of a news van parked on the street. Her hands were cuffed behind her back, so in an attempt to hide her without clothes, she fell onto the grass and curled up. I laughed, as did Diana when she looked through the door peephole. Diana, go out the back door. You don't need to be here for what's about to happen. It's better for your dignity to leave, I told her. Go through the back door and around the corner in the alley. Trust me, I'm not going to kill your husband. I trust you on this, John. You're a good man, she said. She hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. She then headed toward the kitchen and the back door, while I walked back into the living room, taking the second pair of handcuffs out of my pocket. General Peterson was still trying to get up after being beaten by his wife when I walked up to him and easily put his hands behind his back. Now, General, it's time for your moment of glory, I growled as I led him to the front door, his limp obvious from what Diana had done to him. I opened the door and pushed him out. He fell on the grass next to a still-shocked Paula. I waved to the cameras from the door, then closed and locked it. I turned off all the lights and headed to the General's home office. So, I sit here waiting for the authorities to arrive. Apparently, the news people finally called 911 because I was sitting here drinking the General's whiskey and smoking one of his Cuban cigars. Hell, if I'm going to be executed or taken to prison, I'm going to enjoy it a little. I sat with my CT in my lap. It gave me a sense of peace. My only regret was that I pilled Tally before I went on this stupid crusade. I just hoped that she could forgive me. My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone on the General's desk. I picked up the phone. This is General Idiot's office. I'm afraid the General can't answer right now. Can I pass on something? I leaned back in my chair and took another drag from my Cuban cigar. Mr. Blackley? Mr. John Blackley? The man's voice asked. Yes, John Blackley is on the line. Who is it? I answered. I'm Patrick Lackland from Channel 10 News. I'm speaking to you from across the street. Can you tell us why you stripped your wife and your ex-boss without clothes and kicked them out of his house? He asked. I explained the whole situation to him. I told him how I was now the target of an international manhunt due to evidence of infidelity between my wife and the General. I also stated that I now had even more evidence than before, including their admissions that they had framed me so that they themselves would not be suspected of ethical violations and would not be considered a threat to national security. Why is treason considered a national security issue? He asked. Because if a foreign power found out about this, they could easily blackmail them, I shrugged, explaining. But now that everything has come to light, I think I deserve the right to be heard. My wife, for reasons unknown to me, began an affair with General Needledick. There, I can say with confidence that it's not about a night or lack of love or attention. If I had to guess, I'd say she was attracted to his power as a U.S. Army general and director of the CIA. At that moment, I heard sirens approaching. Finally, it looks like someone called them. After waiting until they were sure I was here, I said, "Well, Mr. Blackland, I guess my trip will begin soon. Looks like I'll give up soon." "What is this, Mr. Blackley?" he asked. "I'm sorry, Tally. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't immobilize you." I paused. "Mr. Lackland, please show this on every newscast from now until tomorrow evening. I think it's possible." "Mr. Blackley, good luck to you," he said when I hung up. So now it was just a matter of luck. Well, I guess my luck couldn't be worse. Hell, I've already used my lifetime share of luck tonight enacting my revenge on a show-off and a slut. I poured another 3 fingers of fine whiskey and took another drag from the cigar. When the riot police burst through the front door, I put out my cigar and drank the rest of my glass of whiskey. I closed the bottle and stood up, raising my hands. The first policeman to enter the house saw that I was already in a surrender position, so he allowed his comrades to cover him and came forward to handcuff me. He then informed me of my Miranda rights, and I confirmed my understanding when asked. I exercised my right to remain silent, violating it only to say that I wanted a lawyer and 1 phone call. For the lawyer, I told them to call Rick Sanderson, and for the phone call, I called T's backup phone. She answered on the 5th call. "Hello," she said sleepily. "Okay, the tranquilizer has finally worn off, Tally. It's me." "Look, I'm sorry for what I did, but there was a good reason for it," I said in a low voice. "You slipped something on me," she muttered. "Yes, it's me. I didn't want you to follow me and end up in prison with me. I'm in prison now, but if you want to know the whole story, watch the news. Patrick Lackland on Channel 10 got my exclusive interview if you're interested." I smiled despite everything. "John, I'll come and get you out of there, then I'll spank you," she threatened. Her voice was already normal, yes, her adrenaline had worn off, and the remnants of the tranquilizer had dissipated quickly. "I'll let you spank me all you want. At least I managed to keep you out of jail, and that's important to me," I smiled. "And I'll be there in the morning. I have the number on the call Idaho, so I'll be there in a little while," she said. "Thank you, darling. I really owe you one," I smiled. "See you in the morning." "Bye, John." "I'll be there soon," she hung up. I was taken back to the holding cell and thrown into solitary confinement. Apparently, rumors that I might pose a danger to other prisoners spread quickly. I could live with that. I did push-ups, squats, and even pull-ups by tilting the bed and using the bar at the top as a pull-up bar. Once I was done, I took an hour's nap in the fighting position and was ready for the trial. I was handcuffed and taken to the courtroom. Rick was already there and just shook his head when he saw me. Rick and I met in college, where he was attending law school. He moved to Virginia a few years after Paula and I did, but we reconnected when he met his new wife, Amelia. She's cute, so there weren't any swinger encounters. Like me, Rick doesn't share. I couldn't blame him at all. I was also going to ask him to handle my divorce. We managed to talk for about 5 minutes before the judge arrived, and he agreed to take on my divorce. As soon as Judge Reinhold came in, he told us to sit down, and Rick made a compelling case for why I should be released on my own recognizance. When asked why, I stood up and explained that I had become a scapegoat for my boss, General David Peterson, and my wife, his mistress, Paula Blackley. I had emailed Rick the evidence, and he saved it for future use. The judge looked at us due to the extraordinary circumstances and allowed me to collect my personal belongings. As I walked out of the police station with Rick, we were greeted by a very angry Talisa Martin. I smiled, and she slapped me in the face. "I deserve it," I said, "more for Rick than for myself." "You deserve so much better, white boy," Talisa said as I rubbed my face. "I agree. At least you didn't have to spend the night there," I smiled, nodding over my shoulder at the police station. For some strange reason, the feds didn't even show up to file their charges against me. They must have known I was caught but kept their distance until the time was right. Of course. Once I picked up my CT, showing them my CIA ID, it turned out that in his haste to declare me an enemy of the state, General Dilla had not officially fired me. I simply smiled, accepted my grandfather's weapon back, and walked out of there to meet with my assistant and possible lover, who was really angry with me at this point. Her expression softened, and she hugged me tightly. "Don't ever do that again," she ordered, and it was an order that I was more than happy to follow. "I won't, unless there's a reason to," I promised. "Good, because I don't want you to end up in jail or worse," she exclaimed. The charges against me were dropped due to extraordinary circumstances, for which I was grateful. The FBI got them canceled, which is strange. It turned out that General Peterson had been called before Congress to testify about his affair and the threat to national security it caused. The main thing was that I sent the recordings to all the news networks, posted them on YouTube, and indicated that the director of the CIA and my soon-to-be ex-wife were involved. My Camaro was still sitting where I left it the night before, and after I picked it up, I followed Talisa home. I didn't have anything in my house that I really needed. Hell, I made sure I took everything I wanted when I left. She handed me a spare key when we arrived, and when I walked in, I took off my wedding ring and threw it in the trash. As far as I was concerned, Paula and I were already divorced. Talisa saw me do it. "Hey John, does this mean what I think it means?" she asked. "Tally, this means that as far as I care, Paula no longer exists. Rick will file a divorce suit on her today. Wherever she is, she's probably already settled down with her man-lover. I'm not giving her anything but a home. Screw alimony, screw spousal support, or whatever it's called. Yes, I'm sure her parents have now seen the evidence too." I chuckled. I had turned off my cell phone in advance to make sure I wouldn't receive calls from her angry parents. "Honey, I know I'll probably only be a temporary replacement, but damn, I want you," Talisa said as she walked up to me. She stroked my bearded cheek, then took my hand with a smile. "Come with me, darling. I think I could do this." I smiled back and let her lead me to her bedroom and adjoining bathroom. She sat me on the toilet lid, applied shaving gel to my face, and began to shave me. Her hands were gentle, and her blade was sure. She looked into my dark blue eyes with her dark chocolate ones, and we smiled at each other. When she finished, she said, "Now it's time to take a shower," pointing me towards the shower. "I'll get some towels." I rinsed off, soaked up, and heard the shower door open as Talisa returned with towels. She smiled when she saw my bulging eyes. Her breasts were gorgeous, large and perky. Her narrow waist flared out to her wide hips, and it was the best fifth place I had ever seen in my life. She didn't say a word as she pressed herself against my soapy torso. Our lips and tongues met again, and we kissed as if it was our last day on earth. The water started to cool down, so I turned off the shower, and we wiped each other with towels. We fell on the bed together, and she pushed me onto my back. Paula and I had a great night life, and it was very enjoyable, but the level of intimacy I found with Talisa was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. We made love 3 more times that day, and after each time, we talked more and more about who we were and what we wanted in life. She confessed that she had fallen in love with me since we first met, and I took over the cyber warrior division. I confessed that she was the only woman who turned my head, even when I was in love with Paula. We laughed about it and realized that we were destined to be together. I warned her that we would have to take our time and that being friends was good for the time being. She nodded and said she understood. 6 months later, we returned to our cyber warrior IT team at the CIA, and Talisa became more than just my assistant. At first, we became lovers, more than just friends with benefits. As soon as my divorce from Paula was finalized, I asked Talisa to marry me. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and I put the ring on her finger with great pleasure. After her divorce, Paula moved west. I didn't give her anything, and she didn't ask for anything. We split the sale of the house equally, that's all. She kept her car, and I kept mine. I love my Camaro. General Peterson was served with divorce papers shortly after Paula was served with hers, and his wife took him to the dry cleaners. I presented her with all the evidence I had on both of them, and the judge was more than angry at the circumstances in which the general had placed everyone. He was forced to resign as director of the CIA for, you guessed it, national security reasons. It seems that my opinion about his affair was taken seriously by the president himself, and a new director was soon appointed. The general almost disappeared but decided he wanted to get a little revenge on me before leaving town. This was his biggest mistake, and after attacking me, he was rushed to the hospital. He stayed in the hospital for several weeks, and when he was discharged, he really faded away. No one ever saw or heard from him again. Paula and I talked a few times, but I wasn't going out of my way to see her. Talisa and I invited her to our wedding, but she never showed up. Last I heard, she was somewhere in Seattle. As for Talisa and me, as I just mentioned, we got married and moved back to Los Angeles together. She introduced me to her family, and I transferred from the CIA to the FBI field office in Los Angeles. Talisa immediately left the CIA and just told me she's pregnant. I'm going to become a father. When I look back at the life I lived with Paula, it pales in comparison to the life Talisa and I now lead together. I have never been happier in my life. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the husband did the right thing by installing a covert surveillance system on his wife. What's your opinion? Let me know in the comments. See you in the comments.